Huge story on Manchester City then. Obviously, we know that the reigning champions are taking legal action against the Premier League regarding the associated party transaction rules. When you heard the news, what was your initial reaction? Were you surprised that City were taking this route, or do you think it was perhaps expected given that the Premier League had toughened up the rules?
I think it was not expected. I would have expected, I think, for them to be very focused on the main case. That said, City have all the way through the introduction of the associated party rule situation as it unfolded after the Newcastle takeover, they've always expressed that they had reservations, shall we say, once the rules were detailed at the Premier League level. So whilst if you were to look at the press, what you can see is that initially City actually voted in favour of the proposals around associated party rules. But once they were tabled in the December of 2021, they voted, I think they abstained or they voted against. I think it's where the press seemed to be quite mixed on this, but certainly they didn't vote for them. I suspect at that point, City had put the league on notice that they reserved their rights in terms of the legality of the associated party rules. And then when later in the February of this year, the rules were strengthened with additional requirements from even parties who are not clubs themselves. So even the third parties having requirements to deliver declarations from the directors about fair market value. I think at that point, probably City said, if you go ahead with these, we may well challenge them. And, you know, if you look at the timeline, there wasn't much time between the vote. I think it was on the 7th of February, something like that, and City actually filing their arbitration claim with the Premier League a week later. So City must have been ready to go. You wouldn't be able to draft a case that quickly. So they obviously had it ready, and there we are. So surprised that they sort of bothered at this point, because I think they've got, you know, a bigger case to deal with. But not surprised that they've objected to the rules being expanded in the way that they were in February.
Yeah, as you say, though, that February kind of clamping down on rules seems to have been the final straw for the club, doesn't it? In terms of the timeline of this case, obviously we know that the 2-week hearing is set to start on Monday, I believe. Do you expect this to be finalised and done before the start of the season? And do you think it's important for that to be done before the start of the season? Or do you think this could potentially drag out?
No, well, there's not much scope for it to drag out. I mean, if you look at Rule X of the Premier League rules, it looks like there is no appeal possible for anything that's likely to be one of the sort of reasons that people put to appeal. So it specifically says within the Premier League rules that they can't appeal on a point of law. And it seems to me that given that this is a law-heavy case, that would be the most likely area that somebody would want to appeal, and that is a closed door in terms of the arbitration process in the Premier League. So I would expect this to be a one hit. It will be heard over 2 weeks. 2 weeks does suggest that it's quite a detailed hearing. I would expect it to be very dry, and I would expect the decision to come out probably within a month, 6 weeks, something like that. Maybe 8 weeks. So where does that take us? Probably into the start of the season. But to be perfectly honest with you, I think it's largely irrelevant to the football. I mean, this is a case really around the esoteric application of competition law to the Premier League rules. If it's changed, if City succeed, the rules just need to be changed. The APT will be deleted, and a new set of either associated party rules or something else will have to be put in place. But it certainly doesn't mean the end of all regulation of the Premier League. It's just this. I think it's been framed wrongly. Of course, we're basing everything only off one article, so it's slightly difficult to be too certain. But from what we can see, this is a specific case around associated party transaction rules. And if City were to succeed in showing that those rules were unlawful, then they'll be deleted and everybody will be back to the drawing board. I don't think it will have any effect beyond that, despite what you're hearing in various media outlets and despite what is being briefed by some clubs in the Premier League.
Yeah, exactly. It's not as if these rules are going to be scrapped and then suddenly sponsorship and commercial deals are going to be unlimited. So yeah, I mean, moving on to, I think the Times story mentioned that Manchester City want to be repaid in damages as well by the Premier League. What were your thoughts on that? Do you think City will ask for a significant fee? Do you think they've potentially lost a lot of money because of the clampdown on these ATP rules?
Well, as far as we can see, what's going to happen is there's going to be effectively what would be known in the outside world as a split trial, where you would establish liability, i.e. the legal point, and if City are right and they have been prejudiced by an unlawful set of rules, there will then be a follow-on hearing where loss and causation will be assessed by an arbitration panel where City will seek damages. That will clearly depend on whether City have had sponsorship proposals that have had to have been rejected on the back of this rule that is then found to be unlawful. So I think the fact that City is suggesting that they have made very substantial losses on the back of this rule suggests that a deal has been rejected by the Premier League that they felt should have been approved. And if that is the case, and City were successful in the first hearing, then I think it's more than possible that City would receive damages that could be quite substantial. But I do think cases like this are very hard to win in the first instance. It is very likely that the Premier League took legal advice in terms of the competition aspects of the associated party rules from the start. And it is likely that very, very high quality barristers that are acting on the Premier League side will also have strong arguments for why they comply with the Competition Act, and therefore why City are wrong to challenge. So City have got an uphill struggle to win on liability. But if they were to do so, then yes, I think there could well be significant damages if they can show that they have specific losses.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see if City have indeed had a deal rejected or a sponsorship deal rejected. I think, as you say, that would probably strengthen their case significantly. There's also been reports that the City case has had an impact on the £900 million deal to fund the EFL. In terms of connecting the dots there, do you think there is a relationship there between how that could impact that or not?
No, I think it's
I find it quite bizarre.
And it's pure PR, either by the Premier League themselves or by the clubs who are opposed to City's challenge. They hadn't agreed the EFL deal anyway, so I'm not sure what they're assessing to have collapsed. So they hadn't agreed it, and I think it's complete red herring. But we'll have to see. I mean, we are basing all of this off very limited information. We've got one credible article in the Times, which has clearly been briefed by one club who are not City. And therefore it's a partial look at the case. So, we are guessing, but the EFL story makes no sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it came out in March and April that, over 10 clubs had opposed anyway, and it didn't seem to be going through, and it was set to collapse. So I don't see how the dots are being connected there. In terms of the 115 charges aimed towards City, then, do you think this case on the ATP rules could have a big impact on that? Obviously, we know that, I think the Times reported that will be heard in November and go over a 6-week period. Again, we're basing it off that one story. But do you think that could have an impact on that?
Personally, I don't. I mean, there may be some optics that would help City if they were to succeed here. But the reality is it's unlikely that the panel that hears the 115 case is going to be swayed by a legal challenge to rules that supersede the 115 charges in their entirety. None of the 115 charges relate to associated party transactions, simply because there was no concept of associated party transactions in the rules at the time when City have been accused of their wrongdoing. More fundamentally, in any event, most of the breaches in the 115 charges relate to something much more fundamental than related party transactions, associated party transactions, or whatever. They relate fundamentally to a breach of the current rule, would be E3 and E4 of the Premier League rules, which are very fundamental rules about filing of true and fair accounts. They go way beyond any football rules. These are the absolute basic fundamentals of a company in England, and in terms of a company or a club that's in the Premier League. They have to act in good faith, and they have to file accounts that are true and fair. And if they don't, they're in breach. And that rule, City would be in breach of that rule, regardless of whether the APT rules or even the related party rules were thrown out. So I just don't see that it has a major impact, aside from potentially some optics. But again, we're relying on not very much information, and we know that various people are briefing that the whole game is that City will try and win this to have a big impact on the main case. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me from a legal perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And just to dig further into the 115 charges, and obviously that Times report that said that it will be heard in November over a 6-week period. Were you surprised at that timeline? It does seem quite a lot to cover in such a short timeline. Obviously, we've heard that it's going to take years and months. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, look, if this was in the High Court, this would be a trial that could take 6 months. But likewise, if you're going to have an independent commission sitting, the forum itself is not suited for a case like the City case. But 6 weeks is a lot for an independent commission. It would clearly be the longest independent commission that we've ever had. And, they've had to come up with, I guess, some kind of balance and some kind of process that both parties were happy with in terms of timescales. So, it could take longer, but 6 weeks in the context of an independent commission feels like probably an appropriate amount. And the independent commission will have to do its best. As I say, that if this was in the High Court, it would take a lot longer. But we will have effectively a sort of edited highlights of the case, and if the Premier League can prove their case, City are in big trouble, and we'll take it from there.